Welcome everyone to Current in 30, the 30-minute webinar series brought to you by the Current Consulting Group. We are thrilled to have you with us. To briefly introduce this series, each session is designed to help you stay informed, efficient, and ahead of the curve. On the second and fourth Mondays of each month throughout 2026, we'll break down key things you need to know about workplace drug screening, from emerging trends and regulatory updates to best practices and practical implementation tips. If you missed any of our previous sessions, please visit our website, currentconsultinggroup.com, or our YouTube channel at Current Consulting Group to view those sessions. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Greta Walsh of the Current Consulting Group, and today's presentation is titled Drug Testing Trends, What the Industry is Doing Right Now. This presentation qualifies for half of a professional development credit from SHRM and HRCI for those who attend today's presentation in its entirety. Today's presentation welcomes the founder and president of the Current Consulting Group, Bill Current. Among Bill's many accomplishments, he founded the Current Consulting Group in 1998. He is the former VP of Consulting at Employee Information Services. He is the former Executive Director of the American Council for Drug Education. He is the former Director of the Institute for a Drug-Free Workplace. He has authored 11 books on substance abuse prevention and drug testing, including his 2026 release, What Every Employer Should Know About Marijuana, now available on Amazon. Lastly, Bill is currently a member of the Board of Directors at Endesa and Board of Trustees at the Endesa Foundation. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to our presenter, Bill Current from the Current Consulting Group.
Well, thank you very much, Greta, and welcome everyone to today's webinar presentation. As Greta mentioned, I'm going to be talking about the results of our 28th annual drug testing industry survey. And we're going to cover trends and all kinds of developments since last year's survey. And before I move on to that, I just want to talk a little bit about just a couple of services that we offer because they're pertinent to this issue. One of the things we're going to talk about today is the legalization of marijuana trend, as identified in our survey. We track these laws on a weekly basis. Oklahoma, for example, just a couple of weeks ago, made some significant changes to its marijuana laws that affect the workplace. And so if you're interested in any information like that, or you need help keeping up to date on state law developments, check us out at currentconsultinggroup.com. You'll find information about current compliance, our state law database, and I think you'll find that very helpful to you. Now, I also want to acknowledge the sponsors of this year's survey. They're shown here on the screen: Abbott, ClearStar, Synergy, DESA, DrugPak, HASC, Endesa, Premier Biotech, and Quest Diagnostics. The survey, which I mentioned, we've been doing, this is the 28th annual, so we've been doing it for 28 years, hard to believe, but it's a labor of love more than anything, but the support of these companies makes it possible for us to be able to do this survey. So thank you to this year's sponsors. We'll also be doing a survey in the second half of the year on employer drug testing trends, and many of these same companies will be sponsoring that survey as well. But if you're interested in being a survey sponsor, let us know. We'll send you information about that. The survey sponsors get to add questions to the survey itself. They also get all of the information from the survey once it's completed ahead of the general public, including the raw data. So there's really some nice benefits and perks to being a survey sponsor. So I'm going to go through some key sections of the survey, but keep in mind, the survey gathers tons of data. And so today's presentation will only cover some of that. And we'll try to get to some questions at the end as well. The survey is a reflection of the drug testing industry. So this slide here, this pie chart, kind of gives you a percentage breakdown of the types of companies or the categories of services that participate in the survey, like third-party administrators, background screening companies, representatives of laboratories, etc. So you can see that it's pretty diverse. It's pretty, sort of representative of what our industry looks like in terms of the types of services that we provide. And keep in mind that some of these overlap, like the collection category, 18%. Many collectors are also third-party administrators and vice versa. So you see a lot of overlapping like that. But this is really sort of representative of the types of services that we provide as an industry and who participates in the survey. So let's talk about what we learned from this year's survey. One, marijuana testing continues to decline, but the trend seems to be leveling off. However, this survey was conducted before the most recent developments in the area of rescheduling marijuana, which happened just days before the NDASA conference in Anaheim, California, just 2 weeks ago. So that's not exactly reflected in today's survey, although we did ask some questions about rescheduling, and I'll get to those. Also, we continue to see movement on the oral fluid drug testing issue. Many more companies in our industry offering oral fluid testing, but continue to be concerned about the lack of regulatory final approval. The regulations are there, of course, but no labs have been certified. There's been movement on that since we conducted the survey as well. I'll talk a little bit about that later as well. And then we're going to talk about drug testing pricing trends. You'll find that quite interesting as well. So we asked the question of our survey participants, are drug testing sales up or down this year? And you can see that the largest percentage, 45%, said they're up, 28% said they're the same, and 21% said they're down. Now, that's great that the largest percent say they're up, but I'm a little bit concerned that 21% said they're down and 28% said they're flat. That's neither good nor bad that they're the same, but we wish, of course, that drug testing sales were up at a higher percentage, 70, 75%. We're not there. When we ask the question, will sales increase? Excuse me, I think I came back from that NDASA conference in California with a little bit of a cold. It was unseasonably cold there in California while we were there, so excuse me for that. Will sales increase by the end of 2026? A lot of you, 44%, optimistic about the future. 29% think it's going to stay the same. So you add those two up there, and it's about 3 out of 4 that are optimistic or certain that the industry's not going down. There were 16%, however, that said it would decrease, and so that's something that we want to keep an eye on. Are prices increasing? And this means you as a participant in the survey, your company, are you increasing prices? 46% said yes, 17% said no, but we do not plan to increase. 14% said not yet, but we probably will increase prices in 2026. And 12% said not yet, but we probably will next year in 2027. So what's driving price increases in our industry? Well, most of you said laboratory price increases are causing you to have to increase your prices. MRO prices, collection prices, POCT device prices, and employee, and then things outside of the drug testing itself, just the cost of doing business. Employee salary increases and other increases in the cost of doing business are all having an effect on the prices that you charge to your customers. So are prices going up? Yes, for many of you, you're increasing prices or you're anticipating increasing prices in the next year or two. And the biggest driver is lab price increases, and then just the general cost of doing business. Life is getting more expensive. Now, I skipped a slide there. Let's talk about changes in employer behavior and testing practices. So, marijuana testing trends. So we asked this question about, is there any shift in what is happening with marijuana testing? So 20% of you said that more than 10% of your clients have made some change to their marijuana testing practices. They've essentially dropped marijuana from their drug test panel. 57% of you said between 1 and 10%, and 23% of you said no, none of your clients have dropped marijuana from their drug testing panel. that's the primary reason why I wrote this new book that I've got out called What Every Employer Should Know About Marijuana. Because there are a lot of employers, as you see there, 20% of you said more than 10% of your clients have dropped marijuana from their drug test panel. There are a lot of employers out there that I think are confused about the issues. When you ask them, employers in our employer survey, when you ask them, you know, why they would drop marijuana, a large percentage of them say because it's not legal to test for marijuana in the states where they're located. That's not true. It's legal to test for marijuana everywhere. However, there are a number of states like New York, New Jersey, Colorado, Nevada, and others where there are severe restrictions in place when it comes to testing for marijuana. So keep that in mind. Will employers continue dropping marijuana? According to you, the professionals in the drug testing industry, yes. 58% said yes. 23% said no. And a lot of you, almost 20%, you're not really sure what the future brings. It's interesting, however, that compared to the 2025 results survey, the survey results, 62% said yes and 38% said no. So we saw a little bit of drop from 62 to 58% of you that said yes, employers will continue to drop marijuana from their drug test panel. I don't know if that's improvement. We'll ask the question again next year to see if there's a real trend there. Now, we also asked the question about the impact of marijuana rescheduling. So back in December, President Trump signed an executive order essentially telling the federal government, the various agencies that are involved, like the DEA, the FDA, et cetera, HHS, get marijuana rescheduled from Schedule 1, where it's currently found, to Schedule 3. The difference between Schedule 1 and Schedule 3 is pretty significant. It would really loosen up the restrictions on the use of marijuana. It would allow doctors to prescribe marijuana, for example, rather than simply recommend it. And it would open up possible tax benefits to people in the marijuana business. And so it would be significant. And we asked you, what effect will the rescheduling of marijuana as a Schedule 3 controlled substance have on drug testing overall? So let me go through this, and I'm going to start with the orange bar there. 36% of you said some but not many employers will stop testing for marijuana as a result of rescheduling. Just below that at 28%, many employers will stop testing for marijuana. So we're kind of split as an industry on what impact the rescheduling of marijuana will have on employers testing for marijuana. Now, recently, since we conducted the survey, the acting attorney general came out with an order to essentially following up on President Trump's executive order, instructing the relevant agencies, to go forward with the rescheduling. Now, since then, that's rescheduling marijuana for any marijuana products approved by the federal government, the Food and Drug Administration, of which there are none, and also for medical marijuana where it's legalized at the state level. Since that order came out, there have been, this just happened yesterday, there have been a number of lawsuits that have been brought against the federal government, and we'll see how that plays out. But when we asked the question during our survey, 36% said some but not many employers will stop testing for marijuana, and 28% said many employers will stop testing for marijuana. That's interesting because on the next question we asked, why employers stop testing, if you can see right there, the orange bar again, 64% said reasons related to the legalization of marijuana. So marijuana, the legalization, the rescheduling, it's all sort of at the heart of this growing level of confusion and chaos among employers and even sometimes drug testing providers as to what's going to happen going forward, how do we react to this, how do we protect our company, et cetera. And I think as an industry, we need to be very clear that right now, there's a lot that's still up in the air and we don't know exactly what's going to happen. But if marijuana is rescheduled all the way, and keep in mind the pro-legalization folks are not after just legalizing marijuana for medicinal purposes. They want all marijuana use to be legalized. And so that's their objective. They also want to prohibit employers from being able to test for marijuana. So that's also one of their objectives. But is it having an effect on drug testing overall? That's really the heart of the matter, right? And so we asked that question, have you had many clients completely discontinue drug testing in the last 3 years? And you can see that 49% said no, but 33% say only a few, but some have dropped their drug testing program in the last 3 years. And when you ask them why, it has to do with reasons related to the legalization of marijuana, and the rescheduling controversy is not helping the matter. Now, emerging testing methods and where the industry is headed in terms of how we're going to be doing drug testing in the future. We asked the question, which screening methods do you currently offer? Keep in mind, this is a survey of drug testing professionals. I'm not going to read all of those, but you can see from left to right, lab-based urine, of course, 91%, POCT urine, 72%, and then lab-based oral fluid testing at 71%, hair at 70%, and POCT oral fluid at 54%. Those are pretty significant percentages of you in the industry saying that we offer these services. In other words, you're offering a variety of options to your customers, helping them come up with a solution that fits their specific circumstances and needs. It's not really a one-size-fits-all offering. Now, I will say this about lab-based urine testing on the far left at 91%. I'd have to go back and look to be absolutely certain, but I would bet that when we asked this question, even just 10 years ago, it was 95, 96, maybe even as high as 98% of you that were offering lab-based urine testing. We've seen that percentage coming down while we've seen point of collection urine and oral fluid going up, as well as lab-based oral fluid testing and hair testing going up. Now, it is interesting off to the right, we have background screens, occupational health and wellness screens, fitness for duty testing, and other OC health and wellness screening. Those are all coming into the picture now as we as an industry look for a comprehensive solution to be able to offer to our customers. And so I think we'll see those percentages going up over the coming years. What's being added? Well, if you look at that, you'll see that point of collection oral fluid testing at 23% and lab-based oral fluid testing at 22%, they lead the way, right? They're the two testing methods that most of you are saying we're going to be offering this in the near future. You're going to be adding it to whatever it is you're offering right now. So we're seeing trends or indicators that oral fluid testing is definitely on the way up. What's driving interest in oral fluid testing? Well, it's a lot of different things. Ease of collection at 75%, makes observed collections possible, which thwarts drug testing cheating methods, 67% and 59%. But some things are a challenge nonetheless, right? And it's interesting to look at this slide and see some of these things like down at the bottom, 60%, the shorter, tighter window of detection. 10 years ago, that was considered one of the drawbacks with oral fluid testing. Now, for many employers, especially in states that have legalized marijuana, where they have to show some evidence of recent use or impairment, that now it's considered a plus of oral fluid testing, and rightfully so. But there still are barriers for oral fluid testing for many employers. As you can see here, they really need to learn more about it at 45%, and then some of the other ones that are on the screen there. But there's a lot of there's a need for greater information about oral fluid testing. As the Department of Transportation finalizes its regulations and it becomes possible to finally be able to test for oral fluid, lab-based oral fluid in compliance with the DOT regulations, we'll see these numbers continue to, not these barriers, but we'll see the number of employers that are using oral fluid testing going up. The delay, however, has probably hurt the sale of oral fluid testing, according to 31% of you, probably by a lot, or yes, but probably not a lot at 22%. But nonetheless, the delay in the full implementation of the DOT oral fluid testing regulations has had an impact on the sale of oral fluid testing. What's interesting is that many of your clients, you say, are using multiple testing methods. They're not just a lab-based urine testing client, but they're using multiple levels or methods of testing. So 42% said that you have clients that use urine, oral fluid, and hair testing, all three. 23% said urine and oral fluid, but not hair, and 13% said urine and hair, but not oral fluid testing. Very interesting, right? This is really becoming a trend in our industry. Employers who are using multiple testing methods depending on the circumstances. Maybe they're doing hair testing for pre-employment, and they're doing oral fluid testing for post-accident and reasonable suspicion, and urine testing for random testing perhaps, or some combination. But depending on the circumstance, it will influence which testing method that they use. So as we sort of come to the conclusion of today's Current in 30, let me go back here. We're going to talk about how to apply the insights to improve decision making when it comes to drug testing. So we would recommend that your customers reevaluate their marijuana testing policy for sure, right? We would encourage them to continue testing for marijuana, but make sure that it's covered in their drug testing policy. It's still legal in every state to prohibit employees from bringing marijuana to work, using marijuana while on the job, or being impaired by marijuana while working. That should be in their policy. Balance hiring needs with safety, right? Don't stop testing, don't stop doing pre-employment testing, and don't stop including marijuana in a pre-employment testing program. Prepare for rising costs if you're an employer, because we are seeing a trend there of increased pricing. That's probably reflected in the services that they provide and the products that they sell as well. Everybody is facing increased prices. And then stay compliant with changing laws. Make sure you're educating your clients, you, the drug testing providers, on their options so that it's not a one-size-fits-all, all or nothing type of approach, but that you're offering a variety of options to make sure that you're meeting the client's needs and helping them accomplish their objectives. And then key takeaways: marijuana testing is evolving but not disappearing. We're seeing a leveling off there of that trend. The costs are increasing across the board. That's not unusual, but it's probably in line with the sort of increased cost of living in the United States. Oral fluid testing is growing. Barriers remain, but you as the provider can help tear down those barriers by providing more information to your customers. That's what they're asking for. And the future of multi-method and more flexible testing programs is probably pretty solid. So I'm going to go to Greta for some questions now. There's a lot more information that's in the survey. We'll be doing a number of different surveys in the coming weeks and months. So keep an eye out for invitations to future webinars where we'll do deep dives into the survey results. Again, we want to thank this year's sponsors. They're on the screen there now. I'll leave this up for a minute. And Greta, do we have any questions that you would like to go through today?
Yes, Bill, thank you. One of the questions an attendee is asking is, do you think oral fluid testing will eventually replace urine testing?
I don't think it's going to replace urine testing, but I think it's going to become probably on the same level in terms of the percentage of customers that use oral fluid testing. We asked the question probably 2 or 3 years ago, in the future, which drug testing methods will be most used? And we asked that question 2 years in a row. And the second year that we asked the question, 46% in the industry said it will be urine testing, and 46% said it will be oral fluid testing. I think that's where we're headed. I think we're headed to, sort of a 50-50 split between urine and oral fluid. And that's not to disparage hair testing, because there's definitely is and will continue to be a very important place for hair testing in our industry.
Thanks, Phil. Another question is, how can companies balance hiring needs with maintaining a drug-free workplace?
Well, so right now as we speak, the hiring market has sort of cooled off a little bit. It's sort of a situation where the competition for the best workers is not quite as intense as it was back in 2020 to 21, 2, 3. But drug testing still plays an important role in making sure you're hiring the best possible workers, especially if you're in a safety sensitive industry. So you have a responsibility to your employees, to your shareholders, et cetera, to make sure that you're bringing people into the company who, especially if they're going to perform safety sensitive functions, are not going to be impaired by drugs while they're on the job. And one of the best ways to assure that is by conducting pre-employment testing, especially that includes marijuana. There have been some studies out that have shown that when companies drop pre-employment testing or drop marijuana from their pre-employment testing program, that they see an increase in post-accident positivity, meaning that there are more accidents that involve drugs. People are testing positive more in companies that drop pre-employment or drop marijuana from their pre-employment testing program. So my advice is continue to conduct pre-employment drug testing, include marijuana in those screens, and then have an appropriate response when somebody tests positive that complies with the laws that apply to you.
And the last one, in your opinion, what is the biggest risk you think employers are overlooking today?
Well, I think employers have a responsibility to educate themselves on the marijuana issue and what the laws in the states where they do business actually say. As I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of employers that are confused on the issue, whether they have the right to test for marijuana, whether it's legal in the states where they do business, et cetera. And I think sometimes they overlook the fact that they still have the right to test job applicants and employees for marijuana. There are conditions that apply in New York, New Jersey, California, Washington, et cetera, but it would be a potentially catastrophic mistake to assume that you can't test for marijuana and therefore drop it from your program and hire somebody to drive a delivery van, for example, who maybe has a serious problem with marijuana and smokes marijuana on the way to work every day and shows up, impaired to some extent when you hand them the keys to the delivery van. There's studies out there right now that show that the percentage of people who admit to using marijuana on their way to work is pretty significant. And so you want to make sure that you're doing things that deter individuals from using drugs of any kind that would impair their ability to do their jobs, especially marijuana, because it's so prevalent nowadays. So that would be the biggest thing. Don't take for granted anything when it comes to marijuana. And if it would be helpful to you, buy my book, what every employer should know about marijuana, because there's tons of information in there to help you become educated on the issue and know what to do with your drug testing policy when it comes to marijuana. I think it'd be very helpful.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you to everyone joining us for today's edition of Current in 30. We hope that today's insights have helped you stay informed and confident in your workplace drug screening decisions. As a reminder, this presentation was recorded and you will receive instructions in a few days informing you on how to access the recording. Additionally, this presentation qualified for half of a professional development credit from Sherman HRCI for those who attended today's presentation in its entirety. If you have met that requirement, you will be emailed those activity IDs. Remember, we'll be back every second and fourth Monday of 2026 with things you need to know to stay current in this industry. Be sure to follow the Current Consulting Group and check your inbox for upcoming session details. Until next time, stay current and have a great day.